Hi, my name is Laura Dlugolecki, and I work with the Lake and Shoreland Permitting Program with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. Today, I want to give you a broad overview in hopefully about 10 to 15 minutes of what type of activities might need a state permit when you're working near a lake or a pond. My overall take-home message for all of you listening today is that we in the Lakes and Ponds program are here for you as a resource. Please don't hesitate to email us, give us a call, or ask us to come on out for a site visit and discuss a potential project. We understand that these regulations have lots of aspects and nuance, and if you don't work with it all the time, it might be confusing as to whether or not a project needs a permit. So we are here for you as a resource. I'll provide my contact information at the end. In the Lakes and Ponds program, we have 3 different regulations that we manage: the Shoreland Protection Act, lake encroachment, and aquatic nuisance control. Aquatic nuisance control is about managing aquatic plant species like Eurasian water milfoil through chemical or mechanical means. We are not talking about that today. Today we're focusing on the Shoreland Protection Act and lake encroachment. The dividing line between these 2 different permitting programs is the mean water level. The mean water level is a term to designate the line between what is the lake and what is upland. So on Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, there is a set defined surface level elevation for the mean water level. But for most lakes in Vermont, most inland lakes, the mean water level is determined by the average water surface level between June 1st and September 15th. Because there's not a lot of fluctuation in our lakes, what the shoreline that you observe in the summer is basically the mean water level. So from the mean water level and back across the landscape for 250 feet, that's the protected shoreland area, and activities in that area might require a shoreland permit. From the mean water level and out into the lake, that's where lake encroachment permitting may apply to projects in that area. Shoreland Protection Act applies to all public lakes and ponds that are 10 acres in size or larger. And there are 2 different activities that trigger the need for a shoreland permit. One is the removal of vegetation, which we call the creation of cleared area. So removal of vegetation or creation of cleared area includes the removal of trees, shrubs, natural ground cover, and the duff layer. That's that spongy leaf litter, pine needle type layer on the ground. The other activity that would require a shoreland permit is the creation of new impervious surfaces. And these are man-made structures like houses, garages, decks, patios, paved and unpaved parking areas, gravel driveways, etc., concrete retaining walls. If those are happening in the protected shoreland area, then they would need a permit. Lake encroachment are activities that happen at the mean water level and out into the lake. One of the most common activities that we authorize is our shoreline stabilization activities. So that would be the installation of riprap or repairs to a seawall. Any kind of use of heavy machinery at the shoreline or out into the water would require a lake encroachment permit. Also, replacing culverts, altering the lake bottom through dredging, activities like that would require a lake encroachment permit. The Shoreland Protection Act was passed in 2014 to address issues of overdevelopment or a lot of development pressure on Vermont's lake shores and to prevent the loss of important lakeshore habitat. The regulations are designed to reduce erosion, protect water quality, protect fish and wildlife habitat, and ensure long-term stability of the shore for recreation and scenic views. The Shoreland Protection Act really focuses on limiting development in the most sensitive area of the shoreline, the first 100 feet between the mean water level and back across the landscape. In fact, all new development is required to be set back 100 feet. However, the law does recognize that a lot of Vermont's shorelines were developed long before 2014. There's a lot of existing development within 100 feet. There are even houses that are 3 feet from the water. In these cases, additional development can occur on the property, but we cannot allow anything to move closer to the lake than what's already there. in order to get authorization under a shoreline permit, we review a couple different aspects. And so these are pointed out on this slide. We look at how much impervious surface is on the parcel and how much people are proposing to add. And we have certain numbers we're trying not to exceed. This also goes for cleared areas. So there's a certain amount of cleared area that we don't want to exceed on a parcel. Cleared areas would be lawns, gardens, landscaped areas, areas that are not naturally forested. We're also looking at the setback. If we're working within the first 100 feet, we cannot move closer to the water. And then first, we're also looking at slope. We're directing development off of steep slopes. Not every activity that happens within the protected shoreland area is going to require a shoreland permit. Again, it's always good to reach out and check with us just to be sure, because we're here to provide that guidance. But if you are rebuilding a house within its exact same footprint, that is an exempt activity and no shoreland permit would be needed. However, we look at the footprint as the overhead view footprint. If you are tearing down a house and rebuilding it, but sliding it over 10 or 15 feet, that would require a permit because it's a change to a footprint. So the only exemption is exactly within the same existing footprint. We have an exemption for the removal of dead, diseased, and unsafe trees. For places where a public highway, like a town-owned or state-owned road, bisects the protected shoreland area, the land on the non-lake side of that public road is not jurisdictional to the Shoreline Protection Act, and you don't need a permit for activities that are happening there. Every parcel can install a footpath to access the water. It could be a staircase, it could be a meandering path. It just can't be more than 6 feet wide, and there can only be one. We have some vegetation management standards to allow you to do some selective thinning. If you have a state permitted wastewater system to install or replace, you do not also need a shoreland permit for that. Same thing goes if you have an Act 250 permit for a project next to a lake, you do not also need a shoreland permit. You can maintain any existing cleared area that you had prior to the passage of the Shoreline Protection Act. You can redo your gardens, you can continue to mow, as long as you're staying within the footprint of those existing cleared areas. So I'm going to switch gears now and just talk a little bit about lake encroachment. As mentioned before, encroachments are activities out into the water. The water and the land under the water, beyond the mean water level, are a public resource. These are not private. People's property ends at the mean water level. A lake encroachment is something that encroaches onto that public resource. When somebody proposes a lake encroachment project, we review how that project impacts public trust and public good uses. Because the waters are public, the law is to prevent a private entity from taking away a public resource for their own private use. So, for example, we can allow a public access area to have a public boat ramp because there is a public good associated with that. There's the public good of recreational access for the public. So we can authorize that under lake encroachment. However, we cannot authorize a private boat ramp on a private property because there is no public benefit associated with that. This also goes for boathouses. We do not authorize new boathouses because that is taking up public space for your own private benefit. However, a lot of boathouses were built decades ago, and if there's an existing one, they are grandfathered in, and we can authorize their repair or maintenance, replacement, but we do not authorize new boat ramps. So a lot of lake encroachment projects, like shoreline stabilization projects, do have a public good associated with them. They provide for long-term stabilization of the shoreline. They prevent erosion. They may be keeping a road from falling into the lake. So there are public benefits, and we can allow the placement of material out into public waters because there's a public good associated with it. Most private docks are exempt from lake encroachment. So larger dock systems like commercial dock systems and marinas require lake encroachment permitting. But most private docks, provided that they are either on posts or floating, do not require a permit, and provided also that no concrete is used in their construction. As long as the docks are less than 50 feet out from the shore. You have up to 500 square feet of dock space to use. Additionally, swim rafts, floats, buoys, duck blinds, moorings, those things are exempt from lake encroachment permitting, as are water intake pipes, provided they are less than 2 inches in diameter. So I'm going to do a little quiz for you all listening to see what you've learned, see if you need a permit. Before we get started, I just want to say it's always a great idea to ask first if you're working near a lake. You might think you don't need a permit, but it's always great to ask. And even if you don't need a shoreland permit or a lake encroachment, there's a chance that you might need a wetlands permit or an Army Corps of Engineers permit. And we're always well aware of town permits. We don't like to permit anything that a town would not also authorize. So we like to work closely with our town partners to make sure we aren't authorizing projects that can't be completed. All right, so in this example, this is a shoreline stabilization project, and you can see that the shoreline is eroding, and their plan is to bring in some fill, do some grading, add some erosion control fabric, and plant this slope. Looks like all the work is above the mean water level, and it's happening in an existing cleared area, so they're not removing any kind of natural vegetation. No permit is required because they're not removing trees, shrubs, natural ground cover, so no shoreland permit required. The entire stabilization project is above the mean water level, so no lake encroachment permit required. Okay, next question. Okay, so this is another shoreline stabilization project. They are using heavy machinery to do a little bit of dredging, and they are installing this stabilization technique using coconut fiber coir rolls to stabilize the shore. So yes, because they are using heavy machinery at the shoreline, a lake encroachment permit is needed, and they're also installing additional materials out into public waters. So a lake encroachment permit is needed. These would be under the same permit, they're the same project, but both aspects need to be covered. Okay, so these vertical structural seawalls or retaining walls tend to fail after years, and they need to be replaced. In both of these cases, there are trees growing basically into the wall. So in order to replace the wall, you have to remove trees at the shoreline. Would this need a permit? Yes, this would need a lake encroachment and a shoreline protection permit because you are removing and replacing materials at the water's edge, and you're removing vegetation. Often when you're removing vegetation that close to the shoreline, we're going to require a one-for-one replacement of vegetation elsewhere on the parcel. Okay, so this project is to use heavy machinery to pull out that culvert, replace it, and then put riprap around the culvert to stabilize the area. Yes, this project would need a lake encroachment permit. Hope you guys are doing great on your quiz. Okay, quick for shoreland. If you are rebuilding your house in the same footprint without creating any cleared area, no permit required. What if you want to make a new deck or a new patio? Yes, you would need a shoreland permit. We could only authorize it if it is not moving closer to the water if you're within 100 feet. If it's set back 100 feet, no problem. Okay, if you are rebuilding your house in the same footprint and then adding an addition to the existing footprint, yes, you would need a permit for that addition. Okay, if you are rebuilding your house the same square footage as it was, but in a slightly different location, would you need a shoreline permit? Yes, you would, because you are changing the footprint. Okay, so here's a trick question for you. What if you are rebuilding a boathouse in the exact same footprint? Yes, you would need a lake encroachment permit because if you are working beyond the mean water level, it doesn't matter if it's in the same footprint or not, you just need a lake encroachment permit for work out in the water. Okay, see these trees growing right against these houses? Do I need a permit to remove these unsafe or hazardous trees? No, no shoreline permit is required. You can remove hazard trees without our review. In order for a tree to be considered a hazard tree, it has to be within striking distance of some sort of structure. The roots have to remain in the ground. You can't excavate the root system out. You can't convert it to lawn. And we always ask people to consider replanting farther away. All right, well, I hope you guys did well on this quiz and that you learned a lot. I just want to close with some tips. If you're working near a lake, please have the landowners or contractors reach out to us. We are here to help. Every November, we offer a natural shoreline erosion control certification course for contractors that has a lot of information about the regulations and tips on best practices. And if you ever see something concerning happening near a lake shore, maybe a potential violation, you're not sure if it was permitted, feel free and reach out, or you can just file a complaint either through the phone line or on the enforcement reporting website. You can leave your complaint anonymous if you would like. Okay, so here's our contact information. Please encourage residents, realtors, contractors, whoever to contact us because we are a resource. We're happy to provide more information about the regulations, to discuss potential projects, review project plans. We can provide advice on best practices. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my rapid fire talk about lake and shoreland permitting.